Do any of you feel like in some way God healed you last week? You know what? It was such a good week. I'm not kidding. I want Susan healed, so we're going to keep praying over her. Some only come out by prayer and fasting. We're bouncing off of Mary. You know, some of these things are more difficult. But it was a spectacular week, and I just want to thank you for coming again. And we'll be in here until that hub's ready, but I told them they can stall as long as they want. I love it over here. It's kind of weird being in front of the Shekinah glory. I don't know, if I stand under this, it could look like an alien or something. Like I'm starting a new cult. And so, anyway, things that make you say, we should pray now, shouldn't we? Lord, thank you for these lovely ladies this evening, for your grace and your presence. And sometimes we feel lonely, but we are never alone. So I pray that you break through, and women that feel alone in their marriage, feel alone in their relationship, feel alone, that you'll let them know you're right there, God. You've never left. You'll never leave. You'll never forsake them. You'll be with them always. Give them a palpable presence, that they would feel you and know that you are near, Lord. Bless your word, and bless the teaching of it. May your Spirit do good work in the midst of us, in Jesus' name. Amen. Hagar. Wow. Okay, I thought Mary was amazing. Did any of you realize that Mary was a woman of means before last week? No. Okay, did any of you realize she had 7 demons, Diane? No. And did any of you realize that God gave her a commission before the 12 disciples? That was so amazing to me, and Hagar blew my mind equally studying her this week. No one wants to play second string or be a second thought or wear second-hand clothes. Feeling second may be the worst feeling in the world. A blogger wrote, "I'm not anyone's first choice. I'm not anyone's favorite. People may tell me I mean a lot to them or I'm special to them, but I know there's always someone they will choose over me." Oh my goodness. Another wrote, "I hate being second best to people I put first." That could be mothers under that banner. I was on a cheering squad when I was in junior high. I weighed all of 80 pounds sopping wet and was 4'11". I was the girl that went on top of the pyramids, on top of the mounts. And my freshman year in high school, I broke my leg downhill skiing, and I didn't make the team. And that year, my cousin moved to town, and we always called ourselves twin cousins because we were so much alike. And she made the team right beside my best friend. And for a whole year, I knew what it felt like to be not only second best, but the third wheel. It was like she took my best life right there in my freshman year in school. And it was lonely. Have you ever felt lonely in school? That you're the one that's not in the clique, that people don't get you, whatever it is. In Genesis 16, we meet Hagar. She is an Egyptian slave who probably Abram and Sarah bought while they were on that journey to Egypt, when Abraham had the massive lapse in his faith and told Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister, not his wife. Do you remember this episode? So that's probably where she came in. A famine in the land sidetracked the patriarch from God's path to the promised land. Later, at the request of Sarah, Hagar becomes a concubine to Abraham in a desperate attempt to have a child by way of surrogacy. Nothing new, ladies. There's nothing new under the sun. Despite God's promise that the chosen child would be naturally born from her womb, Ishmael will always be known as the son of the flesh, the fruit of the flesh. It was trying to do the right thing the wrong way, try to get God's will through your will, and it never works. Concubine was a woman acquired by a man as a secondary wife. Her purpose was to provide a male heir in case of a barren wife, or to provide more children to build the family's finances or workforce, and to satisfy the man's sexual desires. Who would like to be a concubine? Raise your hand now. Said nobody ever. A concubine had a few rights according to Hebrew law, but was not equal status to a wife. She was second. If anyone knew what it was like to be second, it was Hagar. Now, there are 4 ways, it's on the screen, that you could become a concubine, in case you were filling out applications. Number 1, a Hebrew girl sold into slavery by a poverty-stricken father. So number 1 is sold by the father. Number 2, if you were a captive of war. So the Old Testament was against rape, and it was very tempting when you were in battle to see a pretty woman and want to take her, but God said no. So you had to bring her home, wait for a while until she was clean, and then you could have her as a concubine. Number 3, you could purchase a foreign slave, as Hagar's situation, or number 4, be a Canaanite woman. Automatically, that put you in that category. Now, the rights of concubines in the Bible are nominal. A woman's status as a concubine was higher than a slave, but lower than a wife. Again, second. The concubines were entitled to proper food and clothing. Well, that's nice. Number 3, concubines could not get a bill of divorce like a wife could. It was a lifelong thing. And lastly, a concubine's children were legitimate but second and never entitled to an inheritance. So as you meet Hagar, this is her plot, her lot in life. It's noteworthy that in Genesis, so far, we would have only been introduced to really important people like Adam, Noah, Lot, Abram. These were all spiritual giants, most heads of families or eventually nations. The readers of the Bible, when you're at chapter 16 with Hagar, might falsely assume God only cares about influential people. You feel like that? I feel bad for all of you ladies being raised in the era of social media, that there are influencers and we all think we need to be like that. And so you might think that's all that God cares about are those people, the influencers, someone with significance or stature, and Hagar had none of it. And so when you finally get to here, you find she's a woman, she's a slave, and God cares about her. It's so beautiful. Like Hagar, most of us are not great in the world's eyes. Many of us are suffering or being treated unjustly. Someone just came up to me to tell me about a woman whose both husband and son tried to kill her. Some of us are being unjustly treated. Perhaps you feel like you're the end of your rope. Maybe you feel utterly abandoned. Then this message is for you. Because this message tells you that He sees you and He cares, even if you feel like you're number 2. Today we're going to examine this woman Hagar to discover, number 1, God called her by her name. Number 2, God made a covenant with her, and I'm saying that word purposely. You'll see why later. Number 3, God let her create a new name for him. What? And then God corrected her vision. So let's look at Genesis. I'm going to start in verse 4 of chapter 16. So he went to Hagar, and she conceived. This is Abraham. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress, Sarah, became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai and Abram said to Abram, "My wrong be upon you. I gave you my maid for your embrace. And when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me." So Abram said to Sarah, "Indeed, she's your maid in your hand. Do with her whatever you want." That's so nice to know. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, she fled from his presence. Now, the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the string on the way to Shur. And he said to her, "Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going?" And she said, "I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress, Sarah." I want you to lock this in. Overlooked by man does not mean ignored by God. That's what this is telling you. She may have been overlooked, but not ignored by God. He seeks out Hagar when she's running away. And she runs into this apparition, this unusual thing in Scripture. In fact, this is the first time this entity is given, which you know anytime something's first in the Bible, that means it's important. It's the reference from here on out. When it's used the first time, that's the intent God wants you to know for the meaning of it. And it's the first time we meet the angel of the Lord. You might want to underline that. Some mistakenly think that this is an apparition of an angel like Gabriel or Michael, but that's not the case. This same figure appeared to Old Testament people like Moses, Gideon, Elijah, and King David. The first time he appeared, it's to second best Hagar. That should mean a lot to you. It does to me. It makes me love God so much more. And most scholars believe this is an incarnate manifestation of Jesus, the second person of the Trinity. Here's why. Angel means messenger. This being came to give a message. Number 2, angel of the Lord lifts him above all other messengers. And number 3, he makes promises that only God can fulfill. Angels don't do that. He seeks out Hagar, who's running from everyone, and she is not seeking God. The Lord is looking for her. Does that feel good too? Sometimes you think you're running and hiding, and God's seeking you out. They never had called her by name, and she's running from God, and God is far more interested in her than she is in him. Jesus said, "The Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost." That's Jesus' mission, to look for people hiding and running. They call that, theologians, prevenient grace, which means God grace precedes any human action. God loved me before I loved him. God sought Lenya before Lenya sought God. God seeks you out. So the angel of the Lord appears to her. And what we can take away from that is we may try to run away from things that happen to us, but there are 2 things that are true. You can never elude yourself, and you can't get beyond God. If you're a runner, you can't run away from yourself, and God will be right there to meet you. So an angel of the Lord came. Second of all, he called her by her name. I had never noticed this before. In Genesis 16, I had to go back and check. Abraham and Sarah, Abram and Sarai, before they had their covenant name, so this is coming, fail to see Hagar as a whole person. They never call her by her name. That maid, that servant, that concubine, that woman, you will never see them call her Hagar. But when the angel of the Lord comes, check it out, he calls her Hagar. I don't know. That's pretty special that God calls her by her name. Hagar, Sarah's servant. In 1936, Dale Carnegie, a writer and speaker of interpersonal relationships, he's like the progenitor of all things business. If you wanted to know how to speak publicly, he wrote this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is his quote: "A person's name is to him or her the sweetest and most important sound in any language." Have you practiced that? When you meet someone, you try and repeat their names. If you're in a store, you look at the badge, you call them by their name. It's a sign of respect, of honor, to know someone's name. Now, I got to admit, I'm not good at it. And this book tells you that's no excuse. I got to work on it. Scientists say that the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain is responsible for all the important processes that make you you. And you know what that part of your brain loves the most? Your name. Researchers did a test where they, hooked you up to electrodes, and then they'd say your name, and guess what? Like a Christmas tree. Bing! Every time your name is said. When I said Cadence, she was like, and then she pointed to her friend. I'm like, Deneva, because we love hearing our names. And get this. Researchers wanted to know if it was powerful for persistent vegetative state. People in a coma who are unable to move, speak, or identify others. And it was demonstrated that even for them, hearing their names for just a moment showed recognition in the brain. How many of you sat by the bedside of someone dying, someone sick, someone whatever, and you kept calling their name? Because it means something to them. So God comes to Hagar running and calls her by her name. And then he wants to correct a false assumption. The Lord asks, where have you come from and where are you going? These questions are not about her current situation. They're about her past and her future. And Hagar answers truthfully, but not completely. She says, I'm running from my mistress. It's like she's confessing, I see no future. I know what my past is, but I have no idea. I have no future. When the children of Israel were carried away captive to Babylon, they lost heart too. And if you were Hagar living in that situation, you would too. And some of the things you're living through, maybe you'd feel this way too. But when that happened, their captives said to them, sing us some songs of, your God. And here's what they said in Psalm 37, verse 2. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? She's just had the snot kicked out of her. And there's no song left, no joy left, no future left. She can only say what her past was. Why do songbirds stop singing? There is a phenomenon. Number one, if they're put in captivity. Number two, if a predator's on the prowl, they'll be quiet. Number three, they finished mating. There's no point of singing anymore. No more Twitter-pated, now I'm pregnant, back off. And we can totally relate to that. Or if they're molting and they're losing all their feathers, they're in a weakened state. Any of those, you can see why Hagar didn't think she had a future. But God comforts his kids in captivity with the hallmark quote all of you know. He tells this to them when they're in captivity in Babylon, Jeremiah 29:11. You can almost recite it with me. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a future and a hope. This is a verse for people tonight. This is going to get you through. You go home, you write that thing, you put it on your refrigerator, you put it on your mirror, you put it on your dashboard. I don't know who it is, but God will give you a future and a hope. The best is yet to come. So he meets her, he calls her by name, he corrects this false assumption. This is hard, ladies. He commands her to return to Sarah and submit. The angel says, return and submit, and it's reversing Hagar's flight. Some commentators said this is insensitive and oppressive. Now, so far, I'm telling you, this is miraculous that an angel would meet a woman like this, call her by her name, and he says, you need to go back. God is going to send her back, but he's going to send her back with promises and blessings for the future that she'll hold on to. She knows she can go back because God will be with her, right? And she has to get these blessings, and the only way to receive them is to go back to the path, the place, and the people of blessings. Because these are God's chosen people. They're the people of God's choosing. They're his blessed covenant people. And if you want to be near blessings, come to church. Those are the people that are blessed. Go to a women's ministry. Those are the people that are blessed. If you want to be under blessings, just get close to someone. I don't care if it's just a drop hits you. You're going to be near the people of blessing. James Boyce Montgomery, a commentator, wrote this: when we run away from something, we never want to go back to it. But if you have made a wrong turn in the direction of your life, as we often do, the only thing to do is to return to the point where you went wrong and start over. Anything else only takes you farther and farther away. In the same way, if we have rebelled against one proper authority, our problem is never solved by continuing in rebellion or even in seeking another authority. Okay, this is the classic, Mom, can I have a friend spend the night? She says no, and then you go, hey, Dad, can my friend... It's not right to go from one authority to another authority when the first authority had already told you something. You just got to go back. So good. The next verses reveal that God is focused on Hagar's future. She won't return defenseless or the same status. She will return with strong promises received directly and personally from God. Number 2, God made a covenant with her. This blew my mind as much as Mary being commissioned. Hagar is a woman of covenant. I just want you to catch that as deeply as it caught me. When I was reading this, I went, gosh, it says here, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, and because the Lord has heard your affliction, he will be a wild man, his hand will be against every man, and every man against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. So she named the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. When I read that, I went, gosh, that sounds just like chapter 15, where Abram just got a covenant. You know, I am the Lord God, and I will multiply your children, and they'll be as many as the stars of the sea. And right here, he's saying to her, you're going to be multiplied. Look at verse 9. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress, submit yourself under her hand. The angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that you shall not be counted for a multitude. It sounded, so I was like, Hagar got herself a covenant. Now I know that was sounding a little feminist, so I'm like Googling Hagar's covenant, Hagar's covenant. Somebody out there had to figure this out. And I'm looking, so then I have to call a friend. That was an old show. Call a friend. So Brian Nixon is like Mr. Smart Guy on campus. I go, Brian, did Hagar receive a covenant? And he goes, big question. And I'm like, and he, yes. And he goes, technically, yes, but a lot of people equivocate. But you know what? If you turn to Galatians 4:24, it says, for the women represent 2 covenants. Speaking of Sarah and Hagar. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. I was like, dude, I got Pauline epistle here now saying Hagar had a covenant. That's pretty good for me. So I'm looking at this text, and I want to underline, Hagar, not a man, not a husband, not a patriarch, received a covenant blessing. Oh, come on. Aren't there thunderous applause? Or what? She is one of 4 people to hear a covenant directly from God. Hagar! Number 2. I'm number 2. She was one of 4 who heard it directly. Unlike Abram's more general promises in 12 and 15 of Genesis, the promise to Hagar has details, as well as the first full birth annunciation. Before Mary from Jesus or Elizabeth from Zechariah, Hagar from God. Wow, she's a Wonder Woman. Covenant means a binding agreement with a legal contract made between 2 parties. Deuteronomy 7:9 says, know therefore, as the Lord is speaking to Israel before they go to the promised land, know therefore that your Lord, your God, is God, the faithful God who keeps his covenant and steadfast love for those who love him and keeps his commandments to 1,000 generations. How long do one of these promised covenants last? Forever. Oh, come on. I mean, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. This is forever, for generations. For Nedra, for Lenya, for Janae, for Cadence, for all generations. His promises last forever, and he made a covenant with Hagar. I want to jump up and down. Hagar's covenant includes God will exceedingly multiply her descendants like a multitude. Number 2, she will bear a son and name him Ishmael. And number 3, Ishmael will be a wild donkey. I don't know about that. Against everyone and everyone against him. This is where you go, wah, wah, wah. What covenant? I like that first part. So I had to research that too, right? The phrase wild donkey of a man is a metaphor, and it doesn't sound as good in American English as it does in the original language. So traditionally, this metaphor sounds negative, being wildly uncontrollable or stubborn. I mean, those are donkeys, right? No one wants to be called a donkey. Not my goal. Honey, can you just call me donkey? Sweetheart pumpkin donkey. No one wants to be a donkey. But wild donkeys in Hagar's ancient world were free, flowing, and they looked more like horses, and it would be more like Mustangs running free in the Wild West to Hagar. He's going to be running wild and free. If you're a slave, running wild and free sounds pretty good, doesn't it? God was promising Hagar that her son would never be a slave. He would be free like the beautiful wild donkeys that roam the desert in her world. Ishmael and his descendants would become the Arab nomadic tribes. And if you've ever been to the Middle East, you will see them running wild and free. And they are against one another, right? I mean, that's part of it. You will be against them and they will be against you. And just look at the Arab world. Now, again, this is the beginning of 2 races, right? Isaac will be the son of promise. Ishmael is the son of the flesh. There's no redeeming what Abraham and Sarah did here, but God did right by Hagar. He's showing you he did right by her. Number 3, God let her create a name for him. It says in verse 13, then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees. For she said, have I also seen him who sees me? Therefore, the well was called Beer Lahai-roi. Observe it between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son Ishmael. So she went back. She had a child, and Abraham must have believed her because he named him Ishmael, right? I mean, the dude's not going to do it. Have you ever heard or seen God? Now, I know you're like, in the petal of a flower, in a rainbow, God speaks to me. I'm one with nature, and I see God. Not what I mean. Some mothers will say, I saw the Savior in the eyes of my newborn child. Still not what I mean. Maybe you're like, I have quiet times where I'm reading scripture and praying, and it is like, oh, the angels open up. Still not what I mean. She said she saw God and heard God. She hears God, sees God, and carries on a conversation with him like a man, like face to face. That's next level, right? Then she names him God, El Roi, which literally means he sees me. The effect of claiming to have been seen by God is Hagar's way of asserting her personhood and relationship with God that Sarah doesn't even have. That's kind of what she's saying. He's my man. He's my main man. He's my dude. I have a relationship. We may have noticed that many names for God start with El, which it just usually means God. Roy can be translated shepherd, shepherd, seeing, looking, or gazing. In other words, when we feel most invisible and forgotten by everyone else, we can remember that God sees us. He witnesses our struggles and comes alongside us. After all, he even sees a sparrow fall. Matthew 10:29, Jesus said, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin? Not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will. But the very hairs of your head are numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows." We often turn to God when there's nowhere else to turn. And that's okay. And maybe that's what he's doing. Maybe you're in a hostile environment, you're at the end of your rope, you're in an unjust environment, but God may have you in the vice because he wants that one-on-one. He wants to be your covenant God. He wants to call you by name. He wants you to let him call him the name that's important to you. All week I've been going, Lord, what name do you want me to call you? I want to call you a name. What name? That's kind of a fun thought, isn't it? Like, what name could I give him? I'm still thinking. You know what? God sought out Adam when he was hiding in the Garden of Eden and said, "Adam, where art thou?" God found Gideon cowering in a wine press trying to thresh wheat where there was no wind, and hiding from the enemy. And he said, when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. Did you hear that? The angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon. He said, "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor," as he was crouching and hiding. God met Elijah crouching in a cave, lamenting that he was the last good guy on the planet. Nobody else was around. And he comes in, he goes, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He's really good at finding people who are hiding. I really pray he finds you wherever you're hiding. You might be hiding in a bottle. You might be hiding in an activity, in pornography. You may be hiding in some really ugly places, crouching, thinking God doesn't see you, and he does. He sees you there. God sees us at our worst to bring out our best. God meets us in our shame, our cowardice, and our self-pity. The tough times make us more humble, and afterwards God can do something incredible with us because then he receives all the glory. When Hagar is removed physically from those who controlled every aspect of her life, a personal identity and relationship materializes. A socially marginalized woman, her most intimate relationship turns out to be God. That's not a bad thing. And he put her there. Abraham must have believed Hagar because he does name the child Ishmael. And after this encounter with God, she will become one of the Abrahamic tradition's primary women, considered the matriarch of multiple Arab tribes. Besides being revered in Islam, she is acknowledged in Hebrew and Christian traditions. And most strikingly, Genesis 16 portrays her as a woman who knows God personally. Do you know God personally? Because he'll come right to you in that suffering. He wants to know you face to face. And then the last thing he does is he corrects his vision, and you have to kind of jump to Genesis 21 because she runs a second time. This time when Isaac is born, Sarah sees Ishmael mocking Isaac, and she goes, "Get her out of here. I'm done with this." Abraham is upset. He's like, "No, don't. He probably loves Ishmael by now." And then an angel appears to Abram and says to him, "What she's saying is right. Listen to her." So the next morning, Abram wraps a thing of water and gives bread and the child, and Hagar walk away. Then God, it says, as she walked away, it's maybe a day later, they're dying of thirst. She can't take it. So she puts the child under a bush and walks a distance away because she says, "I can't bear to watch him." So it says, then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water and gave the lad a drink. So God appears to her again. This time, he says, he heard her son crying. And he comes to Sarah, and he says, open your eyes. In time, Sarah gave birth to that Isaac, and all the wheels fell off. The wheels on the bus didn't go round and round anymore. And this is one, to me, of the sweetest, most simple miracles in Scripture. She's sitting there blubbering and crying, and he says, Hagar, open your eyes. And then she sees a well that's right there. So I was like, is this a miracle? Not a miracle. Seems like it's a miracle. He said, open her eyes, and then she saw it. She didn't see it. And so I went round and around with Skip. She wasn't blind, but she couldn't see. Anybody? I'm not blind, but I can't see the answer to this. I'm not blind, but I don't know what to do. I'm not blind. The obvious was obscured by her pain. Does that settle into anybody? The pain is keeping you from seeing the answer that's right there. Maybe she forgot that God had promised her son would be heirs that would be multiplied greatly, right? We have lapses in our face when things don't go as planned. Then God's will feels uncertain and we can't see his promises. So we're like, God, you said he's dying under a bush over there. What's going on with the promises of God? Jeremiah in 5:20 was frustrated with the children of Israel when they suffered and couldn't see. He said, listen, you foolish and senseless people. You have eyes but do not see. You have ears and do not hear. Do you have no respect for me? Why do you not tremble in my presence? I'm the Lord, the one who defines the ocean's sandy shoreline, an everlasting boundary that the waters cannot cross. The waves may toss and roar, but they can never pass the bounds I set. But my people have been stubborn and rebellious. Maybe this is your life. All these things are happening. You have the promises of God, but you're not holding on to them. You can't see him. You don't know. And the Lord's just saying, open your eyes, Diane. Open your eyes, Tricia. Open your eyes, Sailor. It's right there. The answer is right there. Commentator Matthew Henry writes, many that have reason enough to be comforted go mourning day after day, because they do not see the reason they have for comfort. There is a well of water by them in the covenant of grace, but they're not aware of it, and they have not the benefit of it, till the same God that opened their eyes to see their wound opens their eyes to see their remedy. So beautiful. Note that this encounter was because God heard the voice of the lad and came to their rescue. And it's really interesting. He told Hagar, arise, lay your hand upon the lad, lift him up, hold him by your hand. I will make a great nation of him. He's reaffirming the previous promise. Lay your hand firmly upon him may mean to believe the promise God had made to her. Lay your hand on it. Grab a hold of it. It's my promise. I gave it to you. So beautiful. You know, providence describes God moving supernaturally, naturally. And this is one of those kind of miracles, supernaturally, naturally. Whether the circumstances flowed from ordinary laws or supernatural laws, we can conclude that God was with Hagar and Ishmael, and they miraculously saw him and survived. The great miracle for this Wonder Woman is that she met God face to face, like Moses in the burning bush. He made a covenant with her as powerful as Abraham's. She was a foreign woman, and God let her give him a new name that we take comfort in today, the God who sees me. Then at just the right place, just the right time, he saves her and her son from imminent death, so that Ishmael grows to be a free man who began the Arab nations. If God can keep a promise to a slave, a surrogate, a sojourner, don't you think he could keep his promise for you? That's the lesson. You are his beloved child. and you have exceedingly great and precious promises, and he will fulfill them all. Let's pray. Lord, thank you. Hagar, wow. Lord, I pray if there's women who feel second best, set aside, lonely, running, hiding, that God, you will meet them in the middle of that situation, Lord. And you will make such good promises, Lord, that they'll get up, they'll return, they'll do what is right, and watch you move in great and powerful ways. I do feel that I'm supposed to pray for the lonely tonight. That has just been an ongoing theme. So if you're feeling lonely, if you just want to stand up, you may be alone, but Jesus is right there with you. So if you're lonely, if you want to stand up, I want to pray for you this evening. I was going to say, there's no one lonely? Okay, thank you. God bless you. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard being single. It's hard being a single mom. It's hard being a divorcee. It's hard being a widow. All of those things are really hard. It's hard when the kids grow up and move away and you don't know who you are anymore. You're like, now what? Lord, thank you for these ladies. Will you call them by their names in a way that they know? And will you give them a new name that they can call you? So they will have a covenant connection, a relationship that is irrevocable, undeniable, set in the stars, that give them a firm foundation and a confidence that they may never have had before. In Jesus' name. Amen.